My wife had been pregnant for 10 months, and it wasn't until the day of the delivery that I found out our baby had already died in her womb. After that, a series of strange things started happening around me. Out of nowhere, baby footprints appeared on the floor. I could hear the sound of a baby crying from inside the walls, and my wife began to lose her mind little by little. A month later, my wife died in a car accident. Before she passed away, she sent me a message. Honey, the baby is really locked inside the wall. The baby was gone, my wife was gone, and yet, for some reason, I couldn't help but laugh. What's truly terrifying in this world isn't ghosts or monsters. It's the human heart. The day my wife went into labor, she struggled for an entire night. By midnight, when the baby was finally born, it was already lifeless. When I looked at the baby in the tray, a wave of bitterness rose in my throat. It was a little girl, curled up in a ball, completely still. Her tiny fists were clenched just the way they'd been when they cut her out of my wife's womb. The baby had been dead for quite a while in my wife's belly, her skin already peeling. Didn't you check before? The nurse's words made me feel guilty and helpless. Ruby was always so busy with work. I should have made sure she rested. Maybe the baby would have. I slumped against the wall, sliding down to the floor. My heart felt like it was being pricked by needles with each painful throb. The nurse placed the baby on the tray and covered her with a white cloth, telling me to go buy my wife some Red Bull and Snickers bars to replenish her energy after labor. I was also supposed to handle the death certificate. I had just returned with the food when I heard my wife screaming frantically. The baby is moving. The baby is moving. The lights in the hospital flickered strangely, blinking on and off. I rushed over to check, and to my horror, the dead baby under the white cloth on the tray started moving. Nurse, the baby's alive, I shouted. That's impossible, the nurse said, lifting the cloth and checking the baby's vital signs with her equipment. The result was still the same dead. The baby was really gone. My in-laws, hearing the news, were furious. My father-in-law slapped me right across the face. You useless piece of trash. You can't even take care of your wife and child. My mother-in-law was crying uncontrollably, hugging Rudy and wailing. My daughter married you, and now we're cursed for life. I held my swollen cheek where my father-in-law had slapped me. Mom, Dad, please calm down. Why isn't it you that's dead? My father-in-law slapped me again, this time with more force. You can't even handle something like this, you worthless coward. The slap sent stars across my vision, and I nearly fell to the ground. But I didn't argue, I just lowered my head in silence. My father-in-law and mother-in-law's constant insults were nothing new to me. I had long since learned to endure. Their family ran the company, and they held the financial reins. For all these years, they had always looked at me like I was a failure. My own parents had passed away, and I grew up poor. I had married into their family, and living under their roof, I had no choice but to lower my head. Dadmo, Rudy's weak voice came through, filled with tears. The hospital wants to cremate the baby. I don't want our child to be burned to ashes. My mother-in-law shouted in surprise. Cremate? It's our child. Shouldn't we have the final say on that? Very properly, my father-in-law interjected firmly. Our granddaughter won't be cremated. We'll take her and make sure the hospital doesn't handle it. My mouth was swollen like a balloon, and I could barely speak, muttering, Isn't this wrong? Aren't we ignoring the hospital's regulations? Regulations, my ass. My father-in-law kicked me in the knee. If the hospital dares to cremate my granddaughter, you'll die in their hospital, and I'll make sure they're ruined. I slammed into the wall, my spine getting crushed painfully. The pain was searing, but I managed to say, Dad, please calm down. I'll go talk to the hospital. After much insistence from my in-laws, the hospital eventually relented. My father-in-law placed the baby in a custom-made small coffin, nailed it shut, and insisted I bury it in the back mountain of my family's old home. A few days later, I took my wife home from the hospital. My wife and I had co-founded a medical equipment company. She had once been a workaholic, outgoing and cheerful, but the baby's death had completely changed her. She became withdrawn and melancholic. All the pressure of the company now fell on me. My schedule was packed. I had to entertain suppliers and hospital executives, leaving home early and returning late, exhausted beyond measure. When I got home, my wife would be crying, asking me to go with her to visit the baby. I didn't know what to do. Visit the baby? What was I supposed to do? Dig the child out of the ground? I couldn't bear to see my wife so upset. I made arrangements for the company's work, postponed upcoming meetings, and used remote Google Office to manage things, then promised her I would take her to the old home. After all, it was near the spot where we'd buried the baby. The first night we stayed at my old home, it happened to be the 7th day since the baby's death. I was working on Google handling business affairs, while also trying to comfort Rudy. By the time I finished everything, it was nearly 1 a.m. before I could sleep. I woke up in the middle of the night, feeling thirsty. I thought about getting up to grab some water. Half awake, I reached over the side of the bed and touched a cold, slippery little arm. This wasn't Rudy's arm. Rudy's a bit chubby, but the arm I just touched was small and thin, almost like a newborn's. Could it be the baby's come to see me? I jolted awake, quickly sat up, and turned on a light. When I looked back, the side of the bed was empty and everything was silent. Maybe it was just my imagination. I tried to comfort myself, but my back was already drenched in cold sweat. Rudy wasn't there either. I glanced around. Rudy! I walked into the living room, and in the darkness, I saw Rudy sitting on the couch with her head lowered. Her arms were crossed in front of her chest, and she was rocking back and forth, stiffly, like she was hugging something invisible. On the coffee table, there was a bottle of milk ready to be fed. Just as I was about to call out to her, she put her finger to her lips and whispered, "Shh, don't say anything. The baby just fell asleep. Don't wake her up." A sharp pain hit my chest. I rushed over and hugged her tightly. "The baby's gone. But we'll have another one, I promise." Rudy pushed me away. "Stop talking nonsense. The baby's right here in my arms." She said that and raised her hand like she was showing me a treasure. Look, but her hand was empty. "Where's the baby?" Rudy finally snapped out of it, rubbed her eyes, and looked at me. "Honey, am I losing it? I swear I saw the baby just now." I sighed. "Rudy, I buried the baby with my own hands. There's no way it's here." "You're confused." Rudy didn't say anything. She dragged her tired body, barefoot, toward the bedroom. My heart ached. It's freezing, and she's not even wearing socks or shoes. Wait, why are there muddy footprints where she walked? The sofa and the floor were all covered in small dirt prints. The mud was yellow-red, sticky, and had a faint smell of blood. A chill ran down my spine. This kind of dirt is only found at the back mountain. The baby is buried in that soil. Could it be that Rudy missed the baby so much that, while I was asleep, she secretly went to the back mountain to visit the baby? I rushed to the bedroom and asked, "Rudy, did you go out today?" "No." Rudy shook her head, looking exhausted. "Why do you ask?" I pointed at her feet. "How did you get dirt on your feet?" Rudy looked down at her feet, her face turning pale. "How is this possible? I've been lying in bed all day. I haven't gone out." "That's true. She's been under my nose the whole time. And she's still in her postpartum period, so there's no way she had the strength to go up the mountain." "Honey, the baby really came to see me," Rudy whispered, rubbing her now flat belly. Tears started to fall. "When I was asleep, the baby appeared in my dream. She said she felt lonely and wanted someone to be with her. When I woke up, I saw her standing at the bedroom door. I just held her and rocked her to sleep." "Rudy, you must have been sleepwalking." I tried to comfort her. "Think about it. The baby's just born. She couldn't have spoken or walked here on her own." Rudy fell silent. "Now she's lost her baby." "Rudy, don't be sad," I said, gently touching her hair, only to realize her eyes were locked on me, unblinking, almost eerily so. My heart skipped a beat. Are you okay?" Rudy's mouth stiffly moved, mechanically opening and closing. "The baby's here." I patted her shoulder. "Honey, you're just exhausted. It's all a mistake." Rudy picked up some of the fine dirt from the floor, slowly rubbing it between her fingers. "What do you think this means?" The tiny dirt particles drifted through the air with her fingers, slowly falling onto me. The smell of blood grew stronger. "Don't overthink this." I grabbed a tissue and wiped her fingers forcefully, speaking loudly. "This dirt must have come from when I buried the baby. The soles of my shoes got dirty, and I accidentally brought some back." The louder I said it, the more nervous I felt inside. I remembered clearly, when I was burying the baby, I suddenly heard a dull snap, like bones breaking, coming from underground. I looked down, and the edge of my shoe was covered in a mix of dirt and blood. I thought it was too disgusting, so I left the old shoes at my apartment in the city, never bothering to clean them. Right now, I was wearing a new pair of the same kind of shoes. That meant the dirty pair never came back with me. So where did this dirt come from? A wave of inexplicable fear shot up my spine. Rudy whispered, "The baby came." I saw her footprints, right there by the hallway cabinet. She came back to visit her mommy and daddy. I froze in shock, trembling as I walked over to the hallway cabinet. To my horror, on the edge of the cabinet, there was a faint red footprint. It was small, only about 3 centimeters in size, exactly the size of a newborn's foot. It was already 2 in the morning, the night eerily quiet. I could even hear the frantic pounding of my own heart. Could it be the baby really came? No, that's impossible. How could a dead baby rise from the grave? I quickly dismissed the thought. Everything has a scientific explanation. The footprint wasn't from the baby. It must have been from a wild cat or some other small animal from the mountain. After all, my old house is near the mountain, and it's not unusual for animals to wander into the yard looking for food. I comforted Rudy for a while, and eventually she fell asleep in the early hours of the morning. But I couldn't sleep. I kept tossing and turning, my heart filled with an inexplicable sense of unease. Then I heard a faint creak from the door. Without thinking, I looked toward the door, and there I saw a baby, pale with dark blue skin, crawling on all fours. She moved inch by inch, her slightly larger head hanging down, the sound of her scalp rubbing against the floor sending a shiver down my spine. Her pale, gray eyes locked on me, and she grinned, showing a creepy smile. "Don't come any closer." I tried to get up, but my body was stiff, completely frozen. It felt like something was holding me in place. Sleep paralysis. The baby kept crawling closer and closer. I struggled, but even blinking felt like an impossible task. Cold sweat slid down my forehead, dripping into my eyes, making it burn with pain. The shrill laughter grew louder, coming closer. She had already crawled onto my body. Her gray eyes were fixed on me, filled with resentment, evil, hatred, and malice. She kept laughing. I screamed as everything went dark, and I completely lost consciousness. "Honey, you're really diligent, getting up early to clean." Rudy's voice startled me awake from my dream. I shot up in bed, gasping for air. Was it all just a dream? That dream, the one where the baby with white eyes smiled at me. It felt so real. Rudy shook my arm. "Honey, what's wrong?" "Huh?" I belatedly looked at Rudy. "What did you say?" Rudy sounded a bit impatient. "I said you cleaned the house really well." I shook my head. "I've been asleep all night. I didn't clean anything." Rudy's eyes widened, and she pointed at the carpet under the bed, her voice trembling with panic. "Look at the floor." I cautiously glanced at the carpet. The white coral fleece rug was spotless, not a speck of dust anywhere. How could it be so clean? I jumped up and ran to the living room. There were no 3-centimeter footprints by the hallway cabinet. The white floorboards gleamed, contrasting sharply with my pale face. Thump, thump, thump. My heart was pounding so fast it felt like it might burst out of my chest. "No way. Did I get it wrong?" Rudy mumbled. "I clearly remember seeing dirt on the floor yesterday. That was the baby's trace, her coming to see me." "Rudy, you're mistaken." I tried to stay calm and comfort her. "You're just exhausted. You've imagined the baby crawling out of the dirt." "Is that really what happened?" Rudy sat on the bed, clutching her head, rambling. "The baby, the dirt, none of it was real. Was it just all in my head?" "Rudy, you need to rest," I said, pouring her a glass of milk. "Go back to the bedroom and lie down." I sat on the living room couch, breathing deeply, trying to calm the anxiety that the dream had stirred up. That dream felt too real. I could even smell the putrid stench of the baby's smile. After a long while, I finally calmed down. Right now, the most important thing was to take care of my wife. The cesarean surgery, combined with the loss of our baby, had left her physically drained. I decided to buy a black chicken for her to nourish her body. As I walked through the market, I overheard some women arguing. "You're lying, aren't you?" I went up to the back mountain to dig bamboo shoots yesterday, and I didn't see anything strange. The back mountain. I instinctively stopped and listened carefully as they continued. "I'm not lying. Yesterday evening, I saw something crawl out of the bamboo forest on the back mountain with my own eyes. That thing was terrifying, fat and black." I tapped the woman on the shoulder, only to realize she was my neighbor, Widow Wong. I asked, "What did you see on the back mountain?" Widow Wong turned around and said, "It looked like a water monkey, but it also seemed like a dead baby as someone discarded." My face froze instantly, and my body began to tremble uncontrollably. Could it be true? Did the baby really come looking for me, or was it all just a dream? "Ah, it's Chris." Widow Wong recognized me and grinned, showing her yellowish teeth. "You're back to throw a full-month celebration for the baby, right?" A sinking feeling filled my chest, and I couldn't hide my displeasure. My baby had just been born and died. There was no way we were talking about a full-month celebration. Widow Wong didn't notice my discomfort and spoke with a teasing tone. "When my son got into college, you didn't even come to give a gift. So we'll just consider the full-month celebration red envelope for your baby is settled." My baby is dead. I couldn't hold back my anger, but then I suddenly realized something. My baby had never even been born before passing away. My father-in-law thought this was shameful, so when we buried the baby, I made sure to do it in secret. How could Widow Wong have seen my child? I started to feel short of breath and asked Widow Wong, "How did you know I brought a baby back?" "Who doesn't know?" Widow Wong looked at me strangely. When I went out, I saw your wife feeding the baby. This news hit me like a thunderbolt. The baby was dead. How could Rudy be feeding anyone? I ran home like a madman. From a distance, I saw Rudy holding a bottle in one hand, cradling something in the other, pressed against her chest. She rocked whatever it was back and forth gently, as if trying to lull a baby to sleep. Rudy, what are you doing? I shouted. When Rudy turned sideways, I saw the face of the thing she was holding. It had huge eyes, thick white sclera, and black pupils that stared straight at me. My body shook involuntarily. After a few seconds, I finally realized it was just a plastic doll. I rushed forward and knocked the doll out of her arms. Where did you get this thing? With a clink, the plastic doll's head fell off and rolled to my feet. I crushed it under my heel. Honey, how could you do that to the baby? Rudy was even angrier than I was. She hurriedly squatted down to pick up the doll's broken pieces. I shook her shoulders violently. Rudy, wake up. This isn't our baby. No, she's my baby. You hurt my baby. Rudy clung tightly to the broken plastic doll, her voice filled with determination. Let me go. I need to feed my baby. Enough. I roared. Rudy, our baby is dead. She's buried on the back mountain. Do you understand? My voice must have been too loud, because the neighbors quickly gathered around, drawn by the commotion. Widow Wong and the other women's gossip came pouring into my ears without hesitation. Oh, Widow Wong, the thing you saw crawling out of the back mountain yesterday, was that Chris's wife's dead baby? Couldn't be. How could a dead baby crawl out? Why is Chris's wife hugging a plastic doll like it's a treasure? It's a plastic doll. When I first saw it, I thought she was really feeding the baby. Chris's wife must have gone crazy. These random comments made me both furious and embarrassed. I sighed and held Rudy tightly in my arms. Honey, you're still in confinement. You can't be exposed to the wind. Go inside and rest. Honey, last night when I was sleeping, I suddenly heard the baby laughing outside the door. Rudy buried her face in my chest and began crying softly. I followed the sound outside and found a doll at the door, so I fed it. I carried Rudy inside and she continued. Honey, when I was feeding the plastic doll, did the neighbors laugh at me? No, honey, don't overthink it. I held her closer and gently stroked her back. I think it's the company doing something to us. Even though we're technically the controlling shareholders, those minor shareholders have been eyeing the company and trying to take control. They're messing with us, trying to use this opportunity to get a hold of the company. Rudy, I'll take care of everything at the company. I'm going to find out who's behind all this. You just focus on resting and getting better. Rudy nestled in my arms, and with my help, she returned to the room to rest. Afterward, I made some black-bone chicken soup for her. Once Rudy finished the soup, she seemed to feel much better and fell asleep in bed. After settling Rudy in, I let out a sigh, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we couldn't stay here for long. The place was too remote, and after burying our child here, it just didn't feel right, too unsettling. Beep, beep, beep. The phone on the table vibrated with a message, pulling me back to reality. I checked the screen, and it was a text. The child is dead, he he he. I dialed the number, but no one answered. Frowning, I deleted the message. I quickly packed my things, planning to leave as soon as Rudy woke up. Rudy didn't sleep long, less than an hour, and then she was up. Honey, let's go back to the city, I said to her. Rudy didn't seem to hear me and walked straight to the kitchen. I noticed she was walking barefoot on the floor, just like last night. Something didn't feel right. I quickly stood up. Honey, what are you doing? By the time I reached the kitchen, Rudy was holding a hammer in one hand and a kitchen knife in the other when she came out. Child, Rudy's voice was sharp. The child is inside. Where is the child? I tried to take the sharp tools from her, but I was afraid of hurting her. So I kept talking to her, trying to distract her. Honey, please put the knife and hammer down. The child is behind the mirror. Rudy's finger pointed at me, the sharp blade of the knife gleaming coldly in her hand. I tried to explain. Rudy, the child is buried on the mountain. No. Rudy shouted in a wild frenzy, throwing the knife. It grazed my ear, the sharp edge cutting through the air with a searing pain that shot through my nerves down to my limbs. Ah! I screamed, clutching my ear in pain. Blood quickly seeped through my fingers, dripping steadily onto the white tiles. Half of my ear, it was chopped off by the knife. Rudy! I shouted her name, a chill running through me. She had lost it. If the knife had been just a little more to the side, would she have chopped off my head instead? Rudy was walking toward me, holding a hammer high above her head. I was terrified. Really terrified. I slowly backed away, my voice softening. Rudy, what's going on? I had a dream about the child, she said, her eyes distant. She told me, she's trapped behind the wall, behind the mirror. Before I could even react, Rudy slammed the hammer down toward the wall behind me. Crash. The mirror on the wall shattered, silver shards scattering everywhere. Watch out. I tried to stop her, hoping to keep her from getting hurt, but it was already too late. Her face, her hands, her ankles, they were all cut by the sharp mirror shards, blood splattering everywhere. But it seemed like she didn't even feel it. Barefoot, she just stomped right on the sharp pieces. I rushed to grab her, trying to drag her back to the bedroom. Rudy, wake up. Let me go. She was stronger than I'd ever imagined. To break free from me, she swung a hammer at me. The heavy hammer hit my hand, causing a sharp pain in my bones. I could barely stand it and finally had to let go. Baby. Rudy stepped right onto the broken glass again, hammering at the wall as she murmured, "Baby, mommy's coming for you." The white wall cracked under her hammering, chunks of rough cement flying at her face, but she didn't stop. It was like she was wound up like a clock, just hammering away over and over. I knew I couldn't hold her back alone, so I ran out to ask the neighbors for help. With everyone's help, we finally managed to pull her out of the broken glass. To stop Rudy from spiraling further, I had no choice but to tie her up with rope. The baby's inside the wall. She's really trapped in there. Rudy kept squirming and screaming in agony. I think she's possessed. Widow Wong was the first to speak up. They say that when a baby dies, its vengeful spirit can turn into a ghost, seeking out its mother. There's no such thing as ghosts, Dr. Lee from the clinic said, glancing at me. Chris, has your wife been acting strange lately? I stayed silent, not answering. My Rudy, she was the best person in the world. Hardworking, kind, and always so full of life. But now she was completely broken by the loss of our child. Well, it's understandable, Dr. Lee sighed, patting my shoulder. Losing your first child, it's bound to affect her. She's going through a breakdown. He looked at me seriously. Chris, you should go back to the city. You're too close to the death of the baby here, and your wife will keep spiraling deeper if she keeps grieving like this. I nodded slowly. Rudy, let's go back to the city. Will you come home with me? Rudy shook her head violently, stomping her feet. I'm not leaving. My baby's still in the wall. I have to find her. I crouched down to her level, looking into her eyes as she sat there, tied up. Once, Rudy had been so successful, working hard and shining brightly like a beautiful flower, full of life and joy, always on top of the world. But now, with the death of our child, she was broken. Her clothes were soaked in blood, and the light that once radiated from her was gone. I felt a sharp pain in my heart for my wife. In that moment, I made up my mind. I reached out and gently smoothed her tangled hair, whispering softly, I'll take you to see our baby. With the neighbors watching, I led Rudy up to the back mountain. This place, where we had buried our child, held all of my pain. I had buried our baby here with my own hands, and now I had to dig her up. Baby, I have to do this to help your mom get better. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and began to dig with my hands. About 20 minutes later, something didn't feel right. The child hadn't been buried that deep, and by now, I should have reached her. But all I could smell was a foul stench, and there was no sign of our baby. Where's the baby? The neighbors began to ask, their voices filled with concern. I hurried, digging faster, but still no trace of the child. Had I made a mistake about where I buried her? I looked up, and ahead of me, there was a large rock. No, I remembered clearly. I had buried our baby right next to this rock. The neighbors picked up hose and started digging. They dug about a meter deep, but still found nothing. I told you, the baby's in the wall. Rudy screamed, her voice hoarse and wild. I want to go home. I'm going to tear open the wall and dig her out. We spent the entire afternoon on that mountain, but I still couldn't find our child. The baby was gone, and I was filled with worry and fear. Just then, Widow Wong's voice cut through the silence. I saw something black and purple crawling around that day. Could that have been the baby? Dr. Lee shook his head. No way. A dead child couldn't possibly crawl. Widow Wong hesitated before speaking again. Then, could it be that the child was eaten by that thing? Her words struck me like a sharp blow, and I felt a pang of pain deep in my chest. Our baby didn't rest in peace. She was eaten by something from the mountain. How much pain must she have felt? I regretted it so much. I should never have listened to Rudy's family and buried our child in the old family cemetery on the mountain. I should have chosen to cremate her. Back at home, faced with Rudy's desperate demands, I finally broke down and tore down the wall. But even when the entire wall collapsed, there was still no sign of our baby's body. Rudy broke down in tears. She pointed at another wall in the house and said the baby was buried there instead. The neighbors all said Rudy had lost it and couldn't keep letting her go on like this, or the house would be destroyed for good. I made up my mind. I took Rudy, put her in the car, and we drove straight to the city. But when we got back to the city, Rudy didn't calm down. Every day she would shout at me, saying the baby was buried in the wall at the old house and that she had to go back and save her. I patiently explained that the baby was gone, swallowed by the animals. But Rudy wouldn't listen. She kept thinking about going back to the old house. When I refused her, she would grab anything in sight and throw it at me. Once, when I wasn't paying attention, she picked up a fruit knife and stabbed my arm. Day after day, I grew more and more exhausted, drained. On top of dealing with Rudy's mental breakdown, I also had to handle the problems at work. A few of the shareholders of the company were from the old hometown, and they'd heard rumors about Rudy's condition. They kept insisting on coming to see her. I knew exactly what they wanted. They just wanted to see for themselves whether Rudy had really lost her mind. In the end, I hosted the hometown shareholders at home. Though I'd prepared in advance and told Rudy to stay in the bedroom and not come out, she didn't listen. In front of the shareholders, she was holding a doll, feeding it while saying, "Good baby, drink up, and then have a nice nap." The moment they saw this, the shareholders' faces changed instantly. I had no choice but to gently coax Rudy into the master bedroom and lock the door. Then I went to the living room to meet with the shareholders. "Let me out, the baby's awake, she needs to get some sunlight." Rudy was banging on the bedroom door, and I felt both embarrassed and helpless. "Chris," said Lou, the shareholder from my hometown, "we had a meeting, and everyone agrees that Rudy's current condition makes it impossible for her to continue as CEO. The other shareholders nodded in agreement. "Yeah, her mental state is too unstable. If we let her stay as CEO, it will damage the company's image and reputation. She needs to focus on recovering first." My face turned pale. "Please give me some time. I'll make sure she gets better." But the shareholders shook their heads, clearly not agreeing with Rudy continuing in charge. Once they left, I felt utterly exhausted. Rudy's condition wasn't just affecting our family. It was starting to harm the very company that we depended on. I lit a cigarette, made up my mind, and called my friend Xiao Hui in Thailand. "Xiao Hui, I need your help with something." After hanging up, I opened the door to the master bedroom. Rudy was sitting there, still holding the doll, whispering, "Sure, the baby's asleep." I spoke gently. "Rudy, put the baby down for a moment. I need to talk to you." Rudy carefully placed the doll in the baby crib we had bought earlier, covered it with a blanket, and softly closed the bedroom door. I sat her down on the sofa, holding her hand. "Rudy, I just called a friend in Thailand. He said there are masters there who can turn a deceased child into a Kumanthong, a spirit child. If our baby becomes one, she'll be able to stay with us forever." Rudy's eyes suddenly lit up with hope. "Really?" Seeing her reaction made my heart ache. Rudy used to be so decisive, but now she seemed like a lost little girl with no direction. I squeezed her hand and said firmly, "It's true. Xiao Hui in Thailand knows a master who specializes in Kumanthong." Rudy's face filled with longing. "Let's make the baby a Kumanthong. I want her to stay with me forever." I called Xiao Hui again, set up an appointment with the master, and booked our flights to Thailand for the following week. "We'll go to Thailand next Monday." "Okay." Rudy nodded happily, but then added, "Honey, before we go to Thailand, I want to visit the old house and see the baby in the wall." "Can we?" I shook my head gently. "No need. When we get to Thailand, the master will summon the baby's spirit. We don't need to do anything extra." Rudy looked a little disappointed, but thankfully she didn't argue. She finally stopped pushing the issue. I let out a sigh of relief, feeling like I could finally get some rest. After calming Rudy down, I went back to the bedroom and finally lay down to sleep. It felt like I could finally get a good rest. I slept deeply until the phone rang. "Hello, is this Mr. Chris?" I was still groggy from sleep. "Yes, who's calling?" "This is the police. A nameless female body was found on the railroad tracks, and it's possible it's your wife. Could you come to identify her?" While I was sleeping, Rudy somehow managed to break the door lock and ran out. She was still obsessed with the child buried in the wall. In her rush to get back to the old house, she took a shortcut, crossing the railroad tracks, and was hit by a train. Her body was torn apart, her head completely mangled. At the police station, I recognized her from the ID and her clothes. The mortician told me that her face was almost entirely destroyed. They would have to use plaster to rebuild her entire head. When I found out Rudy was dead, my father-in-law and a bunch of relatives showed up at my place and beat me up, blaming me for not taking care of her properly. My mother-in-law forced me to kneel in front of their family shrine and swear an oath, insulting me for being a son-in-law while demanding I support them like a real son for the rest of my life. I was completely drained, and I started to handle Rudy's funeral arrangements. At the crematorium, I watched Rudy's body slowly being pushed into the furnace. Tears immediately welled up in my eyes. Rudy, you're dead. Huh. You're finally gone. My tears, they were tears of joy. No one was happier than me. That damn woman is finally gone. I hated Rudy. Because I was a son-in-law, she never treated me like a person. She would always call me useless, saying I was just a coward at home. At home, I did everything that shouldn't have been a man's job: cleaning, doing laundry, cooking, bringing her water for her feet, cleaning the toilet. I did it all. Once, my brother-in-law broke his thigh and couldn't take care of himself for months, so he stayed with us. Rudy made me take care of him, cleaning him up like a servant. I did it like a beast of burden. But she still wasn't satisfied and would criticize me for not being thorough enough in taking care of him. So I always had this obsession in my heart. I wasn't a coward. I would do something big, something that would make Rudy see me in a different light. So I started a medical equipment agency and sales company. At the beginning, the company was very small. With my persistence, a few people from my hometown agreed to invest in it. I owned 25% of the shares, making me the largest shareholder and the chairman. Thanks to my efforts, the company slowly started to pick up. Then Rudy suggested she join the company, claiming, when a husband and wife are united, they can accomplish anything. I wanted to say no, but my in-laws started scolding and even hitting me, accusing me of being ungrateful. After a lot of pressure and manipulation, I reluctantly agreed. Once Rudy, that wicked woman, joined the company, she began to strip away my authority. She took some of my shares and eventually took full control of the company. It became hers. She would openly tell my employees that I was useless and a failure. But all I could do was lower my head and silently endure it, not daring to argue back. The new staff started gossiping behind my back, calling me a man who lives off his wife. To maintain the company atmosphere and my own reputation, I pretended not to hear it. But my tolerance didn't make Rudy back off. Instead, it gave her more confidence to treat me worse. Even though I was the one who started the company, she would publicly humiliate me in meetings, insulting me as if I were lower than a dog. Over time, I started to think about divorce. But then she told me she was pregnant. At first, I thought maybe having a child would make Rudy treat me better. But I was wrong. She became even more aggressive, not just bossing me around, but physically abusing me too, punching and kicking me when she felt like it. At the company's annual meeting, she publicly insulted me in front of all the staff, calling me a coward. She even made me kneel on the ground and crawl like a dog, along with a few salespeople who hadn't met their targets. She completely destroyed my dignity in front of my employees. What hurt even more was that my in-laws demanded that the child take their last name. For the sake of the company and the unborn child, I endured it all. Until one day, I found out that my wife had been cheating on me. The news hit me like a thunderclap. One time when I was with Rudy at her prenatal checkup, I bribed the doctor and took the chance to do an amniocentesis. The results came back showing that the child wasn't mine. Feeling completely hopeless, I decided to take revenge. I was going to kill that bastard child and Rudy and take back the company that belonged to me. Beep, beep, beep. My phone buzzed again. It was the same number sending me another message. Your wife is dead, huh? I shook my head helplessly and replied, You're happy that I've lost my wife and child? The reply came, I'm happy for you. Now that your wife is dead, you can finally date me openly. I quickly typed back, 11 p.m., the usual place. Your wife's dead. I'm coming over to your place. I smiled and deleted the message. While I was clearing the messages, I noticed one more unread text. It was from Rudy, sent at 1:29 a.m. 2 days ago. I frowned. Rudy had died 2 days ago. That meant this message was sent right before she died. I opened the message and it read, Honey, the baby is really inside the wall. I scoffed. Typical crazy person, mixing up dreams with reality. But when I thought about it, in order to make the shareholders believe Rudy was insane so I could take back control of the company, I really had to go to great lengths and put in a lot of effort. After returning to my hometown, I added sleeping pills and hallucinogens to Rudy's milk. Then, with a recorder I had prepared in advance, I played the sound of a child laughing and the voice of a child saying, Mommy, hug me. In the end, I used a child's footprint mold and scattered dirt from the mountain next to the entrance cabinet. I remember that day, I felt especially tired. After spreading the dirt, I took advantage of Rudy being asleep to clean up all the areas with dirt, on the entrance cabinet, the floor, the carpet, and everywhere else. I was so diligent about cleaning because I wanted to make Rudy fall deeper into the illusion that she was imagining things. I even went as far as to learn hypnosis and mental suggestion techniques. In everyday life, I constantly gave Rudy subconscious hints. The baby is looking for mommy. I I put hallucinogens in her food, and that scene of her feeding a plastic doll at the door was something I orchestrated. I played a recording of a child repeatedly saying, "Mommy, I'm hungry. I want milk," right next to her. The plastic doll at the door. That was also my idea. Why at the door? Partly to trigger Rudy, but also so the people in our hometown and the neighbors could see that Rudy had lost her mind after the baby died, acting like a crazy person. I was confident that with a combination of hallucinogens, the recording, and the plastic doll, Rudy would start acting like a madwoman. If these methods didn't work, and she didn't go insane, I had a backup plan. I'd make Rudy take sleeping pills and rest early, then arrange for an actor to pretend to be Sun and feed the doll. The actor's face and body would be similar to Rudy's, and after some makeup and wearing the same outfit, no one would suspect it was fake. But luckily, everything went according to plan. The hallucinogen worked, and Rudy fed the doll herself, saving me from needing the actor. Then, I used the recording again to plant psychological suggestions in Sun's mind, who was already experiencing the drug-induced effects and mental confusion. The baby is trapped in the wall. So Rudy kept smashing the wall, trying to dig out the baby that was supposedly trapped inside. But even that wasn't enough. To make it more convincing, I bribed Dr. Lee. He was the only doctor in the village, and his words carried a lot of weight. If he said Sun was insane, the neighbors would definitely believe it. In the end, the scene of Rudy feeding the plastic doll and crazily smashing the wall was captured on video and spread among the neighbors. Some of those neighbors were relatives of the shareholders from the board. They'd be sure to send the video of Rudy going mad to the hometown shareholders. Once they saw it, they'd abandon Rudy, and that would give me the chance to take back control of the company. With my flawless plan in motion, Rudy completely lost her mind, believing every word of the recording I played for her. Of course, I didn't really expect Rudy to become truly insane. With a combination of hallucinogenic drugs, constant subconscious hypnosis, and mental suggestion, Rudy was bound to act out in ways that looked like madness. But once the drug wore off, there was a high chance she'd return to normal. But all I needed was for the shareholders to believe Rudy had gone crazy, and that would be enough. Right up until the end of her life, she still wanted to go back to the village to see the baby buried in the wall. In the end, she died in a train accident. Honestly, it worked out for the best. A train crash only lasts a second of pain. If she had been killed by someone, it would have been much worse. Originally, I had planned to trick Rudy into going to Thailand to worship the Gumanthong spirit, then have Xiaowei hire someone to kill her. I even sent Xiaowei the down payment in advance. I knew very well that Rudy was just disoriented. Once I stopped the mental suggestions and the hallucinogenic drugs, she could still return to her normal state. But now that Rudy was dead, she had been hit by a train, I had taken care of all the problems. Now I could sit back and relax, completely in control of the company. But there was one thing I couldn't figure out. Why didn't I find the baby's body when I went to dig it up? Where did the baby go? That was the only part that really puzzled me. If the baby had been eaten by wild animals in the mountains, there should have been some traces, maybe pieces of the coffin, or remnants like bones or tissue. But there was nothing at all where the baby was buried, like nothing had ever happened. I was confused. Could it be like Widow Wong said, that the baby just got up and walked away? No. A dead baby couldn't just get up. I quickly dismissed the thought. The baby was a stillbirth caused by the drugs I gave Rudy. Now, I couldn't find the body, and I had to admit, I was a bit scared. Forget it. I don't want to think about it anymore. I decided to take a shower to clear my head. As soon as I turned on the faucet, a faint but unmistakable smell of rot hit me. I frowned. The smell was so familiar. It was the scent of decaying flesh. How could there be such a smell in the house? I turned off the shower, and the smell faded a little. Could it be that the water heater hadn't been used in a while, and the water inside had gone bad? I turned the shower back on, thinking I'd let the water out of the heater. But the longer I waited, the stronger the smell became. I couldn't stand it anymore, so I gave up on the shower. In a little while, my sweet Susu will be here. If I don't take a shower, I wonder if she'll be upset with me. I changed into a clean shirt, washed my face, and opened the drawer to take out the delayed action drugs I had prepared earlier. I placed it on the dining table and lazily lay on the couch, watching TV. At 11 o'clock, someone knocked on the door. Knock, knock, knock. Susu had finally arrived, and my heart was racing. I hurried to open the door. But when I opened it, the hallway was completely empty. Did I hear it wrong? I closed the door again. Not long after, someone knocked again. I was starting to get annoyed and went to open the door again. Still, no one was there. My excitement quickly faded, and I began to feel tense. Who's messing around? No response. I slammed the door shut with a loud thud. Not long after I closed the door, the knocking started again. Knock, knock, knock. This time, I learned my lesson. I peered through the peephole. When I looked, I almost collapsed in shock. A single bloodshot eye was sticking out of the peephole, looking terrifyingly creepy. Damn it! I cursed loudly, rushed into the kitchen to grab a fruit knife, and yanked open the security door. How dare you mess with me like this? Ah! I must have pulled the door too hard, because a sharp scream came from outside. Susu was sitting on the ground, looking up at me with a hurt expression. I came to see you. Why are you treating me like this? It was Susu. I let out a sigh of relief and quickly helped her up. What are you doing? Susu shot me an annoyed glance. I just wanted to surprise you. I hugged her tightly. That's a scare, not a surprise. Once the door was closed, I couldn't wait to kiss her. I hadn't felt this kind of excitement in a long time, especially after taking care of that woman, Rudy, for so long. Susu giggled and dodged away. How did I scare you? Is it because your kid's dead, your wife's dead, and now you're afraid they'll come back to get you? I bit her neck lightly. Heartless little thing, didn't I do all this for you? What do you mean, for me? You're doing it for yourself, aren't you? Susu wrapped her arms around my waist and laughed. Look, now that your wife's dead, we can finally be together openly, without any problems. Not quite yet. I shook my head. Rudy's parents would never approve of me being with you. Susu looked at me in shock. They're dead. How can they still control you? I thought back to the past, to those unpleasant memories. Back then, I was broke, completely desperate. I couldn't even afford my college tuition. It was Rudy who helped me go to university. I was young, and I thought if I could use the Sun family's connections, my future would be easier. Rudy's parents expected me to treat them like my own parents after we got married. I was basically a live-in son-in-law, and we even signed a contract. The agreement was that no matter what happened, I had to take care of her parents, or her mom could use that contract to sue me. What are you going to do about it? Susu looked a bit lost. You're not seriously planning to take care of them for the rest of their lives, are you? Of course not. I snorted coldly. I need to think of a way to get rid of them quietly so that Rudy's entire family's fortune will be mine. You're really smart, Susu said, her delicate hand tracing over my body, making me feel a bit ticklish. She added, Rudy's family should have quite a bit of money, right? Not much. Just a few houses in the old hometown. The house here in the city is still bought on a mortgage, I said. I pinched Susu's waist and continued. For me, the value of the company is the biggest thing. But right now, the company's in chaos. I need to put in the effort to reorganize everything, plus take care of Rudy's parents without leaving a trace. It'll probably take me years to set things up properly. Susu's smile quickly faded, and she suddenly pushed me away. I thought once we took care of Rudy, we could be together openly and enjoy the money she left behind. But now you're telling me we still have to wait. I was stunned. Susu, did you only get together with me for the money? At first, I was just attracted to your looks, thinking I could have some fun with you when I was bored. Susu lightly brushed her hair back and continued. Then I got reported for taking bribes at work, lost my job at the hospital, and without any source of income, I had no choice but to rely on your money. Now, I can't wait any longer. I owe a lot of money for my plastic surgery. You need to give me what you have. Susu shot me a side glance. I have all the evidence that you murdered your wife and child. If you don't give me the money, all your dirty little secrets will come out. Shut up. I didn't kill them. The baby was a stillborn, and Rudy was hit by a car. The word murder stabbed at my chest. I clenched my fists and stood up. Besides, it wasn't even my child I killed. That kid was the product of Rudy's affair. Susu laughed so hard she bent over, almost unable to stand up straight. I'm a nurse at the hospital. Falsifying documents to say the baby isn't yours. Easy as pie. Chris, you're just like your wife said, pathetic and stupid. I froze. Are you saying that the child in Rudy's belly was mine? Susu snorted. What else could it be? You idiot. You killed your own child and still thought you were doing the world a favor by getting rid of the bastard. My breath caught in my throat. I had killed my own child. I could still remember the day I put the poison in Rudy's food, causing the death of the child she was carrying. That day, Rudy had scolded me in front of her subordinates, saying, You're an animal. Your wife is pregnant and still working hard, and you're taking advantage of her pregnancy to collude with a nurse at the hospital. But the truth was, I'd only asked Susu about some pregnancy care stuff. She patiently answered my questions, and to thank her, I had just taken her out to dinner. You don't deserve to be human. You should have been born a pig or a dog. Rudy had openly insulted me, completely stripping me of my dignity as a man. I was utterly humiliated. That day, Susu had just gone through a breakup. She asked me to go for a walk with her and poured her heart out to me. I comforted her and also vented about how Rudy treated me. We drank a little too much that night, and in our tipsy state, we ended up at a hotel. At the time, Susu was so gentle, completely different from the furious, insulting Rudy. The next morning, Susu didn't stay with me. She just kindly said it was merely a comfort between two people who had both experienced disappointment. So, one day, she told me that Rudy had slept with one of the leaders at the hospital. At first, I didn't fully believe it, but one day, when I went with Rudy for her prenatal checkup, I secretly arranged for an amniocentesis with the help of the doctor. I sent the sample to a paternity testing lab, and the result came back: this child wasn't mine. Rudy had betrayed me, and that's when I ended up with Susu. I even drugged Rudy. Ah, I yelled angrily, glaring at Susu. You made me kill my own child. How could you be so vicious? Vicious? Susu laughed coldly. I'm helping you. Otherwise, you'd live in Rudy's shadow forever. Always just some man who's too scared to stand up for himself. She shrugged and continued, Don't worry. No one except me will ever know about the child. My anger erupted like a volcano. I cursed, Bitch. Bitch? I think you're the real bitch. You lost your wife and child, and now you're sneaking around on the side. Susu sneered. She rolled her eyes dismissively. Fine. I don't want to keep pretending with you. She fiddled with her shiny red nails, looking at me with a mocking smile. I'll say it one more time. If you give me half of the company's shares, I promise your dirty little secret won't get out. At that moment, her once beautiful face became disgustingly ugly and twisted in my eyes. She made me hate her even more than Rudy. The rage boiled inside me, and without thinking, I rushed at her and grabbed her by the neck. Susu struggled, but the difference in strength between men and women was too much. She was gasping for breath, and it looked like she was about to lose consciousness. Finally, a bit of sanity stopped me. I let go of her. I couldn't kill her. Killing someone would land me in jail, and I didn't want to end up there. Cough, cough. Susu clutched her neck, coughing violently. She was clearly frightened, running to the door like her life depended on it. I helped you get rid of Rudy, and this is how you repay me? Once inside the elevator, she turned around and shouted at me. Chris, you deserve to be controlled by Rudy's family. You're nothing but a useless coward. Get lost. I slammed my clenched fist down on the couch. I'm not useless. I'm not. I'm a person with ambition, someone who works hard for what I want. How else could I have gone from being an orphan to building a life in this city and starting my own company? I just took a wrong turn. I shouldn't have married into Rudy's family. I should have married someone kinder, someone richer than Rudy. Yeah, I'm smart. I kept repeating this to myself over and over. Susu couldn't threaten me. Sure, I hurt my child and my wife, but I didn't kill them with my own hands. The baby died inside her, and I didn't need to take responsibility for that. As for Rudy, I just made sure she lost her mind. As long as I covered up the traces, no one would ever know. She got hit by the train and was unrecognizable. She did that herself after going crazy. Yes, I didn't kill anyone. It was all Susu's fault. That damn woman tricked me into it. I kept repeating this in my mind. My emotions were escalating, and I was parched. This was the side effect of the delayed action drug. Panicked, I rushed to the water cooler, drank a lot of water, and sat down on the couch, trying to calm myself. Click. The lights suddenly went out. The whole living room turned pitch black in an instant. I quickly turned on the flashlight on my phone, trying to figure out what had happened. But as I stood up, the light from my phone revealed a pale face ahead of me. Honey, the baby is still alive. She's bricked up in the wall. The pale face spoke mechanically, its mouth opening and closing as it spoke. I froze, unable to breathe, terrified. Rudy, The sound of a child's laughter came from the bathroom, getting louder as it approached. Baby, it wasn't me who hurt you. I collapsed onto the couch, the light from my phone flickering, then falling under the coffee table. The moment the light vanished, Rudy's pale face split in front of me. Blood sprayed everywhere, cold and sticky, and it quickly covered my face. I instinctively reached up to touch my face, my hand covered in the foul-smelling blood. Honey! Cold hands suddenly grabbed my feet, and voices surrounded me from all directions, filling my ears. The baby is really bricked up in the wall. Ah! I screamed, my mind going blank. The lights and shadows in front of me began to split, my consciousness flickering like light streaks, and my memories shattered. Darkness flooded over me like a tide. I passed out completely. When I woke up, it was already noon. I shook my head, feeling a sharp pain in my skull. But that one sentence kept echoing in my mind. The baby is bricked up in the wall. I have to break the wall and get the baby out. That sentence kept ringing in my ears, like it was pushing me to break down the wall. Finally, I did the same thing Rudy had done. I picked up the hammer and swung it at the wall behind the bathroom mirror. The mirror shattered into countless pieces, glass shards piercing my skin, the pain unbearable. But all I could think about was getting the baby out of the wall. I became numb, hitting the wall over and over again. Bang! With a loud crash, a black, fat, and maggot-covered hand reached out from behind the water heater in the wall. Ah! I screamed like a madman. A short time later, the police burst through the door. The neighbor had complained that I was knocking down a load-bearing wall. When the police caught me, I was holding the baby's arm, repeatedly telling them, the baby is really bricked up in the wall. At first, they thought it was a murder case, but after a closer inspection, they realized I was holding nothing but a fake silicone arm. The arm was filled with rotten pig meat, and maggot eggs had hatched inside it. The rotten meat and maggots were the source of the foul smell coming from the water heater. After leaving the police station, my mind was a blur, and I couldn't bring myself to go home. I went to the office and sat at my desk. My brain felt foggy. Everything was in chaos. The things in front of me started spinning, and I felt dizzy, my vision blurry and unbearably thirsty. I grabbed a glass of water and drank deeply. Then a wave of weakness hit me, and I collapsed onto the floor. Hee! The creepy laughter of a baby echoed in my ears. I snapped my eyes open, and in front of me was the face of the dead baby. Her face was pale, and her black eyes were staring at me intensely. "Don't come any closer," I screamed, running out of the office. But outside the door, there were countless dead babies and Rudy. They were floating in midair, slowly closing in on me, their mouths letting out that piercing, eerie laugh. I gasped for air, grabbed the fire axe, and swung it at them. Get out! Get out of here!" Their blood splattered on my face, the warmth hitting me. Even though I had struck them, they still grinned and circled around me, scratching at me. I lost all sense of control, wildly swinging the axe and hacking at anything in sight. Finally, a wave of weakness hit me, and the world spun. I passed out again. When I woke up, I found myself in a psychiatric hospital, locked in a small room. The psychiatrist in front of me was reading my file aloud. The patient experienced a mental breakdown at work, mistaking colleagues for ghosts, and attacked them with a fire axe. He was then sent here for treatment. I was dazed, murmuring, "Baby, I'm sorry. Wife, I'm sorry." Through the glass window outside the treatment room, I saw a familiar face. Rudy. She was here. She came back. "Wife, I was wrong. I really was wrong. I'm nothing but a worthless pig," I begged. "You're right, you're worthless." Rudy's cold voice came from outside the window. "By the way, congratulations. Your judgment was spot on. Susu, that Sea King, got arrested for offering services to rich second-generation men. Wife, I'm really worthless." I screamed, losing it. "I'll break the wall. I'll listen to you. I'll get the baby out." Outside, Rudy's face remained cold. She didn't say anything else. The psychiatrist nearby commented, "This patient has been through a great deal of trauma. His mental issues are very severe." Rudy smiled faintly. That's what he deserves. Looking at Chris's still handsome face, memories of when they first met began to resurface in Rudy's mind. She and Chris were college classmates. From the moment they met, Rudy was drawn to his good looks. Because Chris was an orphan, Rudy always took special care of him. Maybe it was out of pity, maybe motherly instinct, or perhaps it eventually turned into affection. Unknowingly, she ended up with Chris. She gave him her living expenses, enduring hunger and eating only steamed buns, quietly supporting him to finish his college education. In the end, she married Chris, just as she had always hoped. But after they got married, Rudy realized that although Chris had big ambitions, he lacked the drive to make them a reality. He was lazy, unmotivated, and had poor execution skills. Apart from constantly asking her for money to eat and drink, he wouldn't lift a finger to do anything else. At first, Rudy would patiently encourage him to be independent, but Chris always told her his goals were grand, and the small stuff wasn't worth his time. Over time, Rudy couldn't help but start scolding him. He was always asking his wife for money, acting like a big shot at home but doing nothing. After being scolded, Chris finally woke up and thought about starting a company. Rudy wholeheartedly supported him. With her help, Chris found a few hometown friends with some standing in the city to invest as shareholders, and they successfully raised the startup funds. However, she quickly realized that Chris wasn't good at managing a company. So she started taking control of Chris's company. She truly wanted the business to succeed. Once, during a business negotiation with a hospital, The hospital leaders demanded that she drink 3 shots of liquor. To secure the deal, she didn't hesitate and downed them all at once. After drinking, the hospital leaders tried to take advantage of her while she was drunk. She fought with all her strength to protect herself. For the sake of the company and their family, Rudy, even while pregnant, kept working hard outside. But she unexpectedly found out that Chris was having an affair with a young nurse, Sue, at the hospital. Her anger exploded. She angrily called Chris shameless and a beast. But Chris didn't repent. Instead, he started plotting against her. She witnessed Chris give her the miscarriage drug with her own eyes. From that moment, she decided to turn the tables and take revenge on Chris. She pretended to drink the medicine, but when Chris wasn't paying attention, she spat it all out. Then she secretly set a trap with the help of her relatives, recording evidence of nurse Sue accepting bribes, which led to Sue being fired from the hospital. On the day of her C-section, she successfully gave birth to a healthy baby girl. As for the bruised little girl, she bought a realistic silicone doll with her own money. To get back at Chris, she sent her daughter to live with a distant cousin and pretended to go mad according to Chris's plan. Later, Chris received the news of her death by train accident. How could he have believed she was dead? She bribed someone at the funeral home to find a body with a similar build to hers and slipped her ID into the clothes of the corpse, faking her own death. This made Chris believe the person who was hit by the train was her. Then she secretly snuck into their home and company and put a drug in the water cooler that would cause intense hallucinations. Just like Chris had done to her, she waited until he fell asleep and played a recording by his ear. "Husband, the baby really is bricked up in the wall. You need to save him, husband. The baby and wife have turned into ghosts to come find you." She believed that with the help of the drugs and the recording, Chris would act erratically and eventually start tearing down the wall. When he did, he would find a silicone doll stuffed with rotten pig meat hidden in the water heater. She had bought the doll from Widow Wong, who was from her hometown's back mountain. Widow Wong's husband had once cheated on her, and she hated unfaithful men more than anything. Widow Wong had angrily said that even if Rudy didn't pay, she would still help take care of these scumbags. So Widow Wong helped Rudy spread the rumor that the child buried in the back mountain had crawled out. As the saying goes, if you haven't done anything wrong, you have nothing to fear from ghosts knocking on your door. Chris had a guilty conscience because he had drugged his own child to death. What Widow Wong said would surely make Chris panic, constantly wondering where the child was and whether it had really crawled out of the ground to find him. In reality, the night the child was buried, Rudy had already asked Widow Wong to help take the child out. Widow Wong described that when she took out the silicone doll, the wooden coffin cracked, and the blood from the rotten pig meat soaked into the dirt. It seemed that Chris had been too forceful when burying the body, packing the soil too tightly, which caused the coffin to break. Widow Wong gave the silicone doll stuffed with rotten pig meat to Rudy, who then placed it into the water heater in her home in the city. She had originally planned to hide the doll on the wall, but since it was a load-bearing wall, she couldn't do that. Either way, Chris had completely lost his mind, and her plan for revenge had succeeded. Under the warm sunlight, a gentle breeze blew over the little girl lying in the stroller. She giggled happily as she looked at the bell on the stroller. Rudy couldn't help but smile too. She thought to herself, when her daughter grew up, she would definitely warn her. Love is a mutual effort between two people. I hope you meet a mature lover, and I wish for you to suffer less when you're stubborn, and that it won't be too late when you finally wake up. In the room at the mental hospital. After Rudy and her daughter left with a psychiatrist, I finally stopped my frantic behavior and acting. The dose of medicine Rudy had given me wasn't large. It made me a bit disoriented, but it wasn't enough to make me completely lose my mind. The shouting was because only by acting like a madman could I completely escape from Rudy. I know Rudy, she will never divorce me. My plan has completely failed, and I will forever live under her shadow. When it comes to the child, whether in terms of morality or law, she has the absolute advantage. She will use everything in her power to humiliate me, curse me, bully me, and even change me. She will force me to give up all the company shares and turn me into a robot that operates according to her program, a cleaning expert at home, an emotional garbage can, an endlessly active machine in bed, a superhuman tool at the company. This is how Rudy defines a good man, but it's not the life I want. She's always believed that if a man loves her, he should change for her. She has made me more and more unlike myself, more and more afraid to oppose her, more and more without opinions, more and more weak and submissive. But deep inside, I'm starting to wake up. I begin shouting in my mind, why is it always me who has to change? Rudy, when will you ever make a change for me? Rudy, can you stop cruelly cursing at me? Transformation, perhaps, is the sharpest and most cruel blade in her eyes. Maybe she just wants to make me realize my mistakes through insults, to motivate me to become better. She has always believed that only through strict criticism and discipline can she cultivate a successful husband. She's convinced that one day her harsh words will completely awaken me, and that's when I will truly strive and become the ideal man in her eyes. However, I cannot accept this way. I can no longer bear her constant training and the painful humiliation. Instead of enduring her torment, I'd rather stay in this mental hospital. It's so much better here. At least no one is calling me useless. No one is forcing me to change and meet a standard I can never satisfy.